Is the UK a hot place for biomass? The answer is maybe. It all depends, as for most countries, on what the government chooses to do in the next few months. But it is a very rapidly changing environment. What I hope I can do for you this morning is just sketch out what the UK is like as a country, as a market, what its particular peculiarities are, and where the barriers and opportunities are for people who want to actually sell into the UK. Very briefly, First Core Renewables is a family business. We, I guess like Sweden, have lots of small businesses running in the UK with specialist markets. I own and run First Core. I also have a business called EnviroHeat, which has linked up with some Scandinavian suppliers to put those into the UK market. So I'm able to look at it from both sides, what the issues are for actually meeting customers, and also what the issues are for those meeting customers, and also what the issues are for suppliers who want to get into the UK market. We're government approved. MCS is a phrase you may come across quite frequently in the UK. Microgeneration certification scheme. It's a government way of making it difficult for cowboys to get into the market. It covers all forms of renewables, so whether it's electricity generation, heat generation, or combined piping power, there are certain restrictions that are applied. As I said, I also have a business EnviroHeat, which works in combination with Scandinavian products. I know a little bit about the Swedish side as well. And yeah, we're pretty typical of most small UK businesses, so we try and remain focused while being dragged left, right and centre by government and marketplace. Let me perhaps sketch a little bit for you of the UK, and I will apologise if the statistics seem to be overwhelming, and I will also apologise if the quality of my statistics is not up to some of our previous speakers. But in general terms, UK, 62.5 million people, 43 million adults, in an area, 62.5 million adults, 26 million households, so very widespread. Quite a densely populated country, but an interesting mix of urban and rural. 22 million of those are domestic gas customers, so a huge gas network, that's the 2010 figures. And historically, because of our connection to the North Sea, there's been a huge growth obviously in fossil fuel consumption. Gas consumed last year, that's a lot of gas, but perhaps more concerning is that we're now in that mode. So having been a net producer for a short period, seeing fossil fuels as being a saviour, and convinced ourselves that fossil fuels are a nice, cheap, easy source of heating, we're now importing huge amounts of it. So it's, from that point of view, rapidly changing. We're no different, I guess, to many countries where we're realising that energy is no longer cheap. It's perhaps taking a little bit longer to see through in the UK than elsewhere. The development of the gas industry has affected the way we built our houses. So we've assumed that we don't need space for heating. We've assumed we can hang something on the wall. And that gives us a particular market issue, which I'll come back to a bit later on. Heating sources, 1.5 million households in the UK use oil. 150,000 use bottled gas, LPG. Big use of electricity, which again gives us problems. And look at that bottom number. Wow. 35,000 people actually use gas at the moment. And that's where we lag behind desperately. I heard our earlier colleague talking about being 15 years behind Sweden. I would desperately love to say we are only 15 years behind Sweden. I'm afraid it's not reality. Energy efficiency, and this sounds very unpatriotic, it's a joke in the UK, it really is. We have a horrible base for energy efficiency, which comes from the North Sea legacy, from the house builder who in the 70s and 80s thought energy was free. So we built houses that really energy efficiency wasn't an issue. The next two figures are based on a sort of a random number, if you like, but on a 1 to 100 scale. Our energy efficiency was rated in '96 as being 42 per 100. By 2008, we've made almost no impact. It's on the whole housing stock. So very poor energy efficiency. Historically and still today, private landlords and owners are the worst. Private landlords have no incentive to make life comfortable for their, or cheap for their tenants. And that is just beginning to change. 15% of the whole UK housing stock was rated at this time as being F to G, the worst possible level, i.e. predominantly no insulation. But there are signs of improvement. On the same scale as those first two figures, the 2010 new build was averaging 81, so it is beginning to take line. And that presents lots of opportunities for us. We have customers who are beginning to realise that they want low-cost heating still, but they're prepared to invest in it because they realise where it's going, and they're prepared to make all the other changes around that as well, so they're becoming ecologically conscious, if you like. Only in 2009 did the building regulations in the UK begin to really reflect the need for future improvement, so it's all just on the cusp of happening. Embarrassing statistics. Renewable energy. 3.4% of our domestic energy anyway, generated in 2010. I don't know what the figures in Sweden. 10 times that? 20 times it?
40.
Okay, so yes, 15 times. But, you know, 1.6, we are doing something there. We really are trying hard. And I think the perception, again, for the average person in the UK is, well, it's too expensive. And our government, I think, is tackling that, trying to recognise that. And although we have this small bunch of early adopters, the government's approach is to try and incentivise people to actually get on and do it. So it is a market where we've got growing customer awareness, albeit very low levels, but we have focus is beginning to move that way. So we look at sort of the energy issues in the UK. We've got this big off-gas grid of houses, 11% of our housing stock. And the Energy Saving Trust last year reckoned that 10 million of our homes, 30% of our homes, were what they call difficult to heat. That is where the design of the house makes insulation or improved the things like solid walls, flat roofs, single glazing, all those sort of issues. Many of them are relatively modern. So if you took a typical 1970s house, it would come in that category, where although there's a cavity wall, it's being done in a bad way, where single glazing is the norm, where the roof is difficult. And the realisation that this has to change has resulted in a lot of effort, initially in insulation. So we have 23 million lofts in the UK, to use the statistic, isn't it? The scary one is that, you know, nearly half of them have no insulation. And yet, in the last 6 months, we've put 300,000 lots of loft insulation. It is, to all intents and purposes, free in the UK to get your loft insulated. In the same way, we have 18.5 million houses with cavity walls, of which 8 million have no insulation. So you can see this general picture. So yeah, 200,000. So there is that effort. There have been a number of grants, for example, for anybody who is not earning loft insulation is free. Cavity wall insulation can be free. And the government has been pushing that very hard. And I think the concern they have registered is that it's just not happening quickly enough. So they are budgeting on making these changes and making them happen faster. And that's where, as a finance supplier, we start to say, okay, this might be something positive. The other big political issue, and again, I don't know if this is a European one or not, is what the government has called fuel poverty. 10% of that's a fuel poverty family is deemed to be a household where 10% of total income is spent on energy. It's a worsening problem, obviously, aggravated by the change in fuel prices. So in 2003, the government needed 6% of the UK population in fuel poverty. That is a scary trend, isn't it? 18% by 2009. This year, 24%. So you can see why it's a big issue. The highest proportion of those in fuel poverty live in social housing, housing owned by either housing association or government body. And it has focused, because it's such a political issue, it has focused local councils particularly on what can we do about it. So there is a huge trend afoot at the moment in the UK to deal with council housing stock. So I hope there's a sort of sketch, what I've done to give you an idea that we started from a horrible position. We got ourselves even deeper into a hole. And now we've stopped digging and we're now desperately trying to sort of patch up the structure. So perhaps I'll move on then to look at heating as it is from an installer or supplier's point of view. What do we live with? There is a market stratification, so the consumer does understand that his gas or oil boiler may not cost exactly the same depending on what they buy, but it's a very narrow stratification. So from, if you like, the cheapest gas boiler to the most expensive, there might be a 20-25% range. Obviously not the case if you're looking at biomass as a direct competitor. I was interested to see your roof vent boilers on the slides, because we also install roof vent boilers. You know, compared with a gas boiler, we're talking something that might cost 8-10 times as much. And there is a long education process in getting the customer to understand why. There probably are only half a dozen real players in the UK for gas boilers. The sort of small player market doesn't really exist. And as we go into a biomass future, we are working very hard to educate the customers to why they might want to choose particular types of equipment. So for us, it's important that our biomass has a unique selling. There is something specifically different that you can actually sell to the customer. We're also working hard fighting the lack of understanding about what heating should do. In the UK, the tradition is that you turn on your boiler, you expect your house to be too hot within 10 minutes, and then you turn it off again. And then you repeat the cycle. And that is the way many people live. So a 15 or 20 kilowatt house may well have a 35 kilowatt boiler with an allowance there for rapid heating. I spend a lot of time trying to tell my customers, don't turn the boiler off. And I'm trying to paint a picture of the way selling into this market today. So there's a lack of understanding of what heating is about in the first place. There's certainly a lack of understanding of what I would call the cost of complexity. Feeding gas into a boiler, feeding pellets or wood chip or oil, it's a very different process, and there's a lot of education going on there. And also a lack of understanding of the volumetric savings that a gas boiler manufacturer can make by making 100,000 boilers a year as opposed to 50 or 60 or a few hundred boilers. Fairly recently we've seen this wonderful technological innovation called weather compensation as a box that people can bolt onto their gas boiler. So when we talk about a biomass boiler doing that, it's something, again, new to the customer. So we have an education process to do. Where are we getting with biomass? Well, we are making progress. A few positive graphs. Quite interested in looking at the sort of total biomass usage in the UK and how it has obviously rapidly started to increase. As I said before, we're starting from a low base. It is still a low figure, but it is going the right way. I guess, like you were saying, it's quite nice to see that there is some recognition of that. Biomass selling is not particularly easy in the UK for a number of reasons, so let me just touch on some of the issues there. The first three issues are space, space, and space. Traditionally, the UK has very high land prices, as a result of which we've built our houses very close together. We've then compounded that by installing lineal gas boilers, so we hang our boiler on the wall in the kitchen. And then somebody like me comes along and says, well, I'd like a 1.2 metres square footprint, I'd like another 2.5 metres square for my fuel store, and where am I going to put it? So there is a big issue there. People have said to me, oh yeah, but concentrate on rural homes. That's fine. Please excuse the stolen photographs. Rural homes don't solve the problem in many cases. Historically, rural land was owned by the barons, and they gave their peasants as little space as they could get away with. We've carried on adopting that approach. So even a rural picture like this, that was not clustered. We don't understand and we don't trust district heating because we're worried about the neighbour next door. So there is an issue there with trying to find biomass solutions which are compatible with our properties. Anybody who can come up with a biomass boiler that we hung on the wall would really, really rate the market. But certainly, as as a supplier, you need to recognise that saving relatively small amounts of space is quite important for the small average user. So if we take a typical user, maybe with a 20 kilowatt, 15, 20 kilowatt heat load, if we can have a boiler which will fit into, it's called the kitchen unit space, maybe 1 metre square, then there is a lot to be had there. So I talked about space, and I said that's probably the first 3 issues. The others are on the customer side, if you like. Wood pellet in particular had a terribly bad press in the early days. The British manufacturers decided they could make wood pellets without understanding it. They produced a very efficient dust creating system, and then wondered why the wood pellet boilers couldn't handle it. We are getting over it, and certainly there is now a perception that wood pellet is becoming a usable fuel. There is an ignorance problem as well. 3 years ago, certainly, if I went to a show, people would pick up wood pellets and ask me what they were. They are now beginning to do that, probably 1 out of 3. So we're moving, but particularly with wood pellet, there is a confidence issue. But one advantage we are gaining rapidly is that actually the straightforward fuel price is cheaper than fossil fuel, and that's a major move forward for us. So the acceleration of oil and gas prices upwards has given us a direct cost advantage for the first time. I think the difficulty then is that we've still got a lack of knowledge of technology. People think they understand gas and oil. They don't, but they think they do. Whereas, as I say, they're coming into wood pellet from an environment where they really don't know what they're even looking at, and they don't understand. And I think the other aspect behind that is that they perceive it to be a complex and relatively inflexible way of heating, whereas many times the reality is the opposite. So yes, cost and flexibility. The good side is within that market, I've just tried to sketch for you that the government, as I said, has decided we ought to be much more environmentally friendly, and so they've pushed on with incentives. There are 2 issues two incentives running in the UK. Both come under what is called the Renewable Heating Incentive, which I understand is the first in the world, and is a way of incentivising any organisation, commercial or residential, to generate their heat from renewable sources. With the commercial side, and this is classified as being businesses over 45 kilowatts of heat load, there are no specific qualification criteria. So provided the boiler is deemed safe, it can be installed with a commercial customer. And the restrictions there have been removed. And as a result of that, there is a big market opportunity opening up within the UK within water generating, like on that second, like factories. Smaller installations, less than 45 kilowatts, even if it's an industrial customer, they are deemed to be domestic customers, and therefore there are this MCA registration comes in. That is, the equipment and the installer has to be formally approved before they can take it up. The key issue there, if you want to look at the top 2 tiers, is how much the government is paying. They are saying for a commercial customer, which has to be metered, they will pay you 7.5 pence for every kilowatt hour you generate. To give you an idea, oil in the UK is just over 6 pence a kilowatt hour, and bulk pellet is about 5 pence. So the government will pay you significantly more than the fuel costs for running this. So they really have put an incentive in place. The other thing I find encouraging is that compared to the original consultation documents, they're paying a lot less for heat pumps. The original proposals were offering as much for heat pumps as they were for biomass, but that has actually changed. The rates are guaranteed to be index linked for 20 years, so it is a long-term incentive, very long-term incentive. And the only threshold as far as an industrial customer is concerned is displayed in a very complex way on the right-hand side there. But in essence, if you run your boiler flat out through the heating season, one shift, you'll get paid a high rate, and then it drops back to the lower rate. You're still saving money, and therefore it really is a good investment policy. Domestically, which is where we focus, unfortunately, the incentives have yet to be finalised, but they are paying a one-off payment to biomass customers. However, you've got to get through the MCS requirements, and that I think is where you find you need to be, you need to have a local assistance, if you like. So the domestic arrangement has yet to be finalised. It will start next autumn, but it will require MCS accredited equipment and installer. So you will, coming into the UK, you need a UK partner basically to make that actually work effectively. Yes, accreditation is somewhat torturous. If you talk to anybody who's been involved in trying to get it through the loops, there's always one more bit of paper, I'm afraid, but it is possible, trust me. Timescales, yeah, next autumn is when it will really start to happen. And at the moment, the plan is for 20 years out of industrial, and then it's linked to the rates. I think that's the key thing. As with our feed-in tariffs for electricity generation, it will trigger spate investment. They've also given themselves a get-out clause, but provided your installation is early in the phase, it won't change. So they allow themselves to review the rate for new entrants. And they have specifically said they will protect rates once you're running the system. No air heating at the moment is a key issue. It's been debated at the moment if you're using air source heat pump, if you're using biomass to use hot air, it doesn't qualify either. There is a statement of intent as of next year. The effect on customer profile from a domestic point of view is quite critical. Because what they have done is, whereas they used to offer grant, they're now saying we'll retrospectively fund. So the customer has to be able to afford the investment. So we're finding ourselves with a stratum of the market in domestic. We've got wealthy customers who will do it as an investment, as opposed to doing it for any ecological reasons. So our early adopters of 5 years ago have been replaced by investment wizards, if you like. That's their view. So domestically, short-term premium from now until March, 950 sterling, £1,000 return, which has kick-started the market, but there will be a hiatus then before we have a final. And I think it's generally assumed that what they're doing is they're using this to judge how the market responds before they finally announce the rates. So with electricity generation, they caused themselves quite a problem because the adoption went through the roof. And they're trying to make sure that they get a balanced response. That's one thing that's mentioned in the UK is that our heating oil prices are significantly cheaper than our road fuel prices. I was noticing that the diesel price for a car is almost exactly the same in the UK as it is here. But our heating oil prices are half as much. So the investment, the balance of investment shifted slightly, which I think is part of the reason behind the proposals. Last week was 6.9p kilowatt hour. Pellets only 5. So there is a straight gain as soon as the customer invests. Main gas prices up 3%. No news to anybody, is it? It's all going the right way. It's a question of then where it will end up. Most of my domestic customers, we're looking at a 4-year payback on a significant investment. That is why the market is going to take off. Because this incentive puts so much money back into the customer's pockets. And in doing so, distorts the market as well as incentives do. 20-year rate. It's worth thinking it's a long-term investment process for an equipment supply coming into the UK. Just to give you a little bit of a comparison, what we expect the market to do. Q1 2010, before the feed-in tariff was there, 63 wind turbines. Q2, 630. PV. That's 2,000 PV installations, Q1, 7,000 Q2. Result. Yes, very hot. Market needs understanding. Find yourself a good USP, price it carefully, find a good UK partner. Thank you.